I would like to thank Bonus Level Entertainment for sending us a copy of this game to review. Fox and Forest is a 2D indie platformer that attempts to really capture the style and feel of 2D platformers on the SNES and Genesis. More than other sprite-based indie platformers, I really do think Fox and Forest achieved this, from the company logos to the menu layouts. However, just going for a nostalgic style does not instantly make your game a classic, so will Fox and Forest survive the changing seasons? Let's find out. Players control a fox named Rick, who, lured in by the promise of treasure from a bird named Patty, is sent on a quest to bring the strength back to the ancient wise tree in the middle of their home. This tree has control over the 4 seasons themselves, but with the local monsters stealing some of his bark, his control is weakened, and the seasons are running amok. Armed with a blade and a crossbow, Rick is given the ability to swap between the seasons by the tree, and heads off to retrieve the missing bark and claim his reward. It's a basic story, and that's fine. I don't feel any particular attachment to any character, but at least they have personalities, so it isn't boring. From a gameplay perspective, players can defeat enemies from a distance with the crossbow, or get up close and slash them with the sword. The sword is stronger, but the range is low, so it's a risk and reward system. This is fine in concept, but in practice I found that the arrows barely do any damage to enemies, so using your sword is the best way to go. However, a problem with this method is that enemies don't feel any knockback from attacks, and very few go down in one shot, meaning you're almost always guaranteed to get hit when you try to attack. This is really bad, and combined with really poor enemy placement and respawning enemies, makes the early levels more frustrating than needed. For the sake of transparency, I was playing the game on hard mode as opposed to normal or easy, and my understanding is that the enemies take fewer hits to defeat, but this doesn't take away from the issues I mentioned. Now, as the game goes on, players can buy upgrades to the sword and more attacks, which make enemies go down quicker. Rick is also rewarded with magic arrows that deal more damage, making shooting a valid option. But this only makes the later levels more bearable, and as there is a power creep anyway, it makes the new strength null to the difficulty. Another issue with this game is how long the stages are. Every single one goes on for way too long, and I feel the game would have been better served if the levels were shorter, but there were more of them. As it stands, each of the 4 zones have 3 levels, one of which is a bonus, and a boss, and that is it. Each of these levels have a checkpoint, which players can spend coins to activate, which is a neat mechanic, but this isn't the issue long stages face. It's the backtracking. The game has a number of collectibles that can be used to upgrade magic and strength, and these are optional. What is not optional are the magic seeds, of which each non-boss stage has 5. These are required to advance the plot, and many can't be collected until another magic arrow is gained later in the game, meaning backtracking through really long levels to get 1 or 2 missing collectibles is a requirement, and it just feels like padding. This becomes especially frustrating when some magic seeds require specific circumstances to occur before they appear, like being in the right season at the right spot, even though nothing around might indicate this. It just feels like bad design. The boss fights are a mixed bunch. The first one was frustrating due to its first stage having a difficult hitbox, but the others were fun, and there is variation on what needs to be done. This is largely in part to the game's main mechanic, the season switching. Every level has a specific season attached to it, and the players can use magic to force the season to change to a pre-assigned second one. This changes the entire level and is used for puzzles and finding secrets. For example, in the spring setting, you can't cross a lake, but turn the season to winter and the lake is frozen over. This recalls the season stages from Kirby, but as a whole game. I like the idea, and it is used really well in the boss fights, but it also has issues. By limiting it only to 1 pre-assigned season, the solution to any problem is always really simple, and the only obstacle is your magic bar. If you had access to all 4, then discovering the right season could have added to the puzzle and made the game more complex. Another issue is activating the season change. It can only be done when standing on the ground, and forces an animation that not only halts movement, but leaves the player vulnerable to the enemies that are still moving. This can cause many unnecessary and unfair deaths, and it, once again, limits the potential creativity that this mechanic could have offered. From a presentation standpoint, the sprite work is really well done, but feels a little inconsistent at points. The 2 main characters feel less detailed than everything around them, from bosses to backgrounds, almost like they were done by completely different people, and this really stands out in some levels. The music is nice and feels very 16-bit, but I never found any song that memorable, and some were a little too quiet so I struggled to hear them. I feel like I'm being a bit too negative with the presentation here, because it is really good. It's just, it has a few issues like, well, everything else in the game. Overall, Fox and Forest isn't a bad game or a broken game, but it is frustrating, both in what was included and what wasn't. It really does nail the feeling of an SNES and Genesis era title, but with this also comes many of the issues those games faced, with poor level design and janky movement and attacks. The game was frustratingly difficult at times thanks to the limits of its design, and when combined with the long levels, it left me feeling tired more than satisfied. There are some good ideas here that a possible sequel could expand on to make a great game, but as it is now, it is incredibly average and easily forgettable. Maybe if you're in the season for nostalgia, but otherwise, I would just hold off. Once again, I'd like to thank Bonus Level Entertainment for sending us a copy of this game. I hope you all enjoyed my review. All the patrons are now on screen, including our super patron, the Duke of Dorks. Link to his channels in the description below. Hit that like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you can stay up to date, and always remember to return to the source.